So the other day I did a video on Omarchy's Omacom Foundation getting $8 million of initial funding. And in the comment section for that video, one point kept coming up over and over again. Omarchy is just a set of config files. Why did it get $8 million? 8 mil for a config files? Am I missing something? Are they funneling 8 mil into a vibe-coded config directory? 8 million to fund a .config directory? Well, actually, it's, 10 million now because 2 additional people joined in. That being Drew Houston of Dropbox and Peter Steinsberger of OpenClaw, both adding an additional $1 million each. Now, I think it is completely reasonable to be critical of this foundation, or frankly, any foundation, for the state of the project, where the money is going, even for the people involved if that is what you want to focus on. However, I can't really give you an objective assessment on whether or not they deserve the money, whether or not they should get the money. There are places I would like the money to go instead of just this project, but I want to focus on whether or not Omarchy actually is a distro. Because one thing I like to hammer on about here is, whilst it is totally fine to be critical of a project, I think it is important to focus on the current state of the project, not where it was at some arbitrary point in time. I don't like people being critical of KDE Plasma 6 because back in KDE 4, things were a mess. Yeah, we can talk about it in like a historical context and all this good stuff, but that's not the project. You can't really just hold that over their heads. And here's the thing. When Omarchy first released, absolutely no one, being honest, would say this was really a distro. This, when it first released, was Arch Linux with some fancy opinionated change on top of it. It was Hyperland with a rice. It was QuickShell with a rice. It was NeoVim with a rice. It was the terminal with a rice. It was the shell. It was other various pre-installed components with a rice. That is literally all that it was. It was the thing that I constantly talk about so many distros being, which is the base distro with a post-install script packaged as an ISO. And that's all it was. And frankly, anyone being honest would tell you that is exactly what it was. It was a post-install script with a pretty in-depth rice, with a fancy website, with an ISO, some pretty good marketing, but a post-install script nonetheless. However, that was a year ago, and since then, some stuff has changed. Omarchy has a dedicated mirror of the Arch Linux repos. Now, a mirror unto itself is not a rare thing. The Arch Wiki will talk about these, we'll talk about how to select different mirrors and how to go and set up your own mirror, all this good stuff. But a mirror nonetheless, and this is important. And the reason for that is they have multiple update channels: stable, RC, Edge, and Dev. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, with stable, even though it is based on Arch Linux, rolling about a month behind the other more up-to-date releases. And not just stable, but all of these update channels pull from the Omarchy mirrors. If we go over to the Pacman configs, check the mirror list for stable. This is pulling from stable-mirror.omarchy.org. We have RC here, rc-mirror.omarchy.org. We have Edge, again, mirror.omarchy.org. With Dev being the one exception, this I believe pulls directly from Arch Linux. They don't only have this though, they also have the Omarchy packages repo. This is a separate repo that is not just a mirror. For the most part, this is a collection of things that a mainline Arch Linux user would be pulling in from the AUR. Things like beta versions of 1Password, bin releases of things like Cursor, and other things like that. But importantly, and this is another major thing, they also have a set of first-party applications. This is Omarite, this is just a text editor. Omartrack, a native cross-format motorsport telemetry analysis workstation because DHH likes Formula 1. Omasnap, a screenshot tool. Omazed, a theme switcher for Zed and Omarchy. And Omacalc, a calculator. Also, whilst it is not officially released, DHH does keep talking about something called Omabot. This appears to be an AI harness for interacting with the various models out there. There are many of these, none of them are really that unique, but it is something which also does exist. Whilst none of these are crazy complicated applications, they are applications nonetheless. Plus, the kernel they use has a bunch of additional kernel patches made to it. And from the latest episode of the Stand Up Pod, which is the Primeagen and THDV's podcast, it is very clear he also has a bit of a bone to pick with NixOS people, so who knows, maybe something is going to also happen down that line as well. At this point, that remains to be seen, and who knows what's going to happen. There is $10 million here to work something out. That's a lot of money. Whilst people might pretend like, oh, that's not that much money, again, as I said in that first video, this is more money than the Omacom Foundation and the KDEV are making over multiple years. Now, being a distro is not a judge of quality. You can very well be a terrible distro that no one should use. There are plenty of these meme distros out there that don't really have a reason to exist besides haha funny AmugOS, haha funny cat ears, right? You don't have to be a good distro, you can just be a joke. But if we consider CashOS to be a distro based on Arch Linux, Manjaro to be a distro based on Arch Linux, and especially EndeavourOS to be a distro based on Arch Linux, then by extension, so is Omarchy. It doesn't mean you have to use it. It doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't even mean it's a great distro. But if all of these are distros, then so is this. Because CashOS is Arch Linux with some package changes, with your own custom repo, and everything else just comes from Arch Linux. They don't even have their own mirrors. Manjaro has their own mirrors, and they roll back a little bit before the mainline version of Arch Linux. And EndeavourOS, they have some custom repos, but besides that, is literally just Arch Linux with a fancy rice. But I am willing to compromise. If we're going to keep saying that Omarchy isn't a distro, I'm happy to start calling these fancy post-install scripts. That's totally fine by me. I don't actually care either way. My point is, let's have a bit of consistency. Either none of these are distros, or all of these are distros. And hey, Omarchy even has its own custom zero-day exploits, and if that doesn't make it a distro, I don't know what does. But all of this is a whole separate question as to whether or not this is a good use of money. So let's talk about that. Whilst Omarchy does have their own mirror infrastructure, it is just a mirror infrastructure. They are not the ones maintaining the packages that come from Arch Linux. Most of what is happening here is just taking Arch Linux and mirroring it. And this is something a lot of people do. But if that original source just goes away, if no one's maintaining those packages, Omarchy has a problem. Yes, they have their own custom repo, but that's 40 applications, and that's not most of what they're doing. Right now, without Arch Linux, Omarchy does not exist. Now, they do have the funding, if they want to just go off and do their own things, completely separate from Arch Linux, still make use of Pacman if they want to, but separate from that hold of the initial package source. They can. But if they're not going to, and they're going to rely on Arch Linux, I do think some of this funding needs to go to Arch Linux package maintenance. This is something that will benefit every single other distro that builds off of the Arch Linux infrastructure, whether it be mainline Arch Linux, CashOS, EndeavourOS, Manjaro to some extent, but even things like SteamOS. All of these rely on the Arch Linux infrastructure. Some of them, like SteamOS, could go and do their own thing if they really want to, but right now they don't. So this is something that will benefit a lot of people. Now, whilst Hyperland is being directly funded, without QuickShell, you wouldn't have most of the fancy desktop that exists on Omarchy. Hyperland is just the window manager. All of the fancy graphical interface elements, most of that is QuickShell. For some reason, the website's lagging. I don't know why. And I was going to say here, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but just yesterday, we changed that. So it turns out that Outfox, the creator of Quickshell is now also being directly sponsored by the Foundation. These would be the most front and center components that every user is going to see. Arch Linux, and I know DHH did reach out regarding the AUR malware situation and never got a response back, so we'll see what happens there. Hyperland, which is being funded, and Quickshell, which is being funded. But this isn't the entirety of what makes up the distro. There's a whole slew of other tools that maybe you know you're interacting with, maybe you don't know you're interacting with, maybe some users use, things like the GNU tools, systemd, NeoVim, LazyGit, LocalSend, LibreOffice, MPV, OBS, Kdenlive. All of these are tools that are shipped with Omarchy, and I would absolutely love to see large-scale donations made to every single one of these projects, even if it's something like $10,000 a year. That is something that this foundation can do without even thinking about. Basically, I'm talking about anything that is shipping with the distro that isn't also owned by a large company. I don't think you need to go and pay, like, OpenAI to make use of their stuff or anything like that, but anything that is this open source volunteer project, I would love to see supported. This is $8 million of initial funding, now at $10 million, with more updates known to come, which is likely going to be more and more funding. I know there are people in the FOSS space who want to see this money pissed away, used on absolutely nothing productive, because they don't want to see anything positive attached to this name, and for them, seeing all of this money wasted is worth it. That is not me. This has the opportunity to do something that is undeniably good for Linux, that will actually raise everything up to a whole new level. I don't care if you hate DHH, I don't care if you hate Omarchy. This is $10 million of funding, and if you actually care about Linux, if you actually care about open source, you should be advocating for this money to go to projects where it's actually going to benefit people. But that is just me. I will be keeping an eye on this. I am hoping the money goes to useful things. I do like the funding going to Quickshell. I do like the funding going to Hyperland, but there is so much more, and there is so much funding there which hasn't been allocated to anything yet. So we will have to wait and see what happens here. So let me know down below where you think this funding should go, what you think is the best use for it, and hey, do you even think it should have happened in the first place? I would love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well. If you're on mobile, go and hype the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Daily Bearer Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and give me the money!